Today is November the 10th, Monday, November the 10th, 2025. Parshat Hayyei Sara in Bereshit. I want to say one of my favorite parshas, but one of the best parshas, one of the greatest parshas. Actually, it has truly one of the great stories, the novella we've talked about in the past of the entire Torah. Chapter 24, which is the charge to the servant, and then the his journey to Haran to get a wife for Isaac. I think constitutes one of the great little minor short story novella in the entire Torah. It's a beautiful, beautiful story, and I've talked about it in the past. It's beautiful because it's beautifully told, and there's so much literary texture to it. It's beautiful because the character is a great character. The servant is an interesting character. It's beautiful because there's, really a lot of dramatic tension in there. Um, and uh, there is resolution there, and there's a lot of pathos there. We feel what the characters are feeling, and one of the goals that I think one ought to have in reading these stories, especially biblical stories, but frankly, any classic tale, um, is to be inside the story and to place yourself inside the story and to really try and be the witness, inside the story, and to see yourself as if you are there, and and watch the characters, literally second by second or frame by frame, as we've been saying, and and watch and try and listen to them, and then ask, what is it that they're trying to explain and say here? How are they saying it? And as usual, there's no one answer on this question with regard to anything that's says by anybody. Other people who teach these texts will use the term. There's a certain music to the to the text that when you read it, you hear the music. We had a very sad loss in the shul last week with the passing of Carrie Glass, and I'm transcribing the eulogy I wrote, and I'm stunned by the fact that no matter how many times you read a sermon or read a text or read it, you can't read it without hearing it. You have to hear the way the voice is. You have to hear the pauses. You have to hear the certain inflections. The word on the page may not be humorous if it's not stated with the tone of irony or the tone of humor and all of that. And so, what is always missing from our reading of biblical texts is, the way that the characters are speaking and the way the text is speaking, and that, of course, gives rise to the kinds of discussions that we have. And so here we have that kind of question emerging in a central moment in this story, which we'll get to in a second. Um, but prior to that, what I want to do is just do a short little, we'll do a short. I'm going to only read, the first 10 verses of chapter 24 or something like that. I think it's like the first 9 verses of it, where Abraham gives the charge, and we're going to look take an exercise in how to read the text very closely, um, and then focus on the one statement that Abraham makes to his servant, in which he says basically to the servant, "Look, God, God will provide." It's like the joke that we always say about the son-in-law who marries someone and says, he's so pious he thinks that. I said, "How are you going to?" The father of the bride says to the prospective son-in-law, you know, "What are you going to do for a living?" And he says, "God will provide." He says, "How are you going to manage?" "God will provide." "And you're going to buy a house?" "God will provide." And so the friends of the father say to him, "Well, what do you think of your son-in-law, prospective son-in-law?" And they said, "I think he's wonderful. He thinks that I'm God." you know. All right. That's an old joke. All right, here we go. So this is the text. And it's I want to read it in total slow motion, okay? Because we got to really understand these and really take you inside the text. And I think, we lose that when we dove in it. We lose the close reading when we are in shul just listening to this go by in 30 seconds. V'Avraham Zaken, Baba Yamim, V'Adonai berach et Avraham bakol. Now Abraham was old, advanced in days, and God blessed him, Abraham, in everything. ויאמר אברהם אל עבדו, זקן ביתו, המושל בכל אשר לו, שים נא ידך תחת ירכי. Abraham said to his servant, to the elder of his household, who ruled over all that was his, pray, put your hand under my thigh. ואשביעך באדוני אלוהי השמיים ואלוהי הארץ אשר לא תיקח אישה לבני מבנות הכנעני אשר אנוכי יושב בקרבו. I want you to swear by God, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the women of the Canaanites among whom I am settled. Ki, rather, el artzi ve'al moladati telech ve'lakach isha livni liyitzchak. You are to go to my land and to my kindred and take a wife for my son, for Yitzchak. ויאמר אליו העבד, אולי לא תובע אישה ללכת אחריי אל הארץ הזאת, ההשב אשיב את בנך אל הארץ אשר יצאת משם? The servant said to him, perhaps the woman will not be willing to go after me to this land. May I then bring your son back there, back to the land from which you once went out? ויאמר אליו אברהם, הישמע לך, פן תשיב את בני שמה. Take you care that you do not ever bring my son back there. Adonai, Elohei HaShamayim, asher lekachani מבית אבי, ומארץ מולדתי, ואשר דיבר לי, ואשר נשבע לי לאמור לזרעך אתן את הארץ הזאת, הוא ישלח מלאכו לפניך, ולקחתי אישה לבני משם. God, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my kindred, who spoke to me, who swore to me, saying, I give this land to your seed, he himself will send his messenger on before you, so that you take a wife for my son there. If she doesn't want to go after you, Vinikita, you will be clear. Mishvati zot, from the sworn oath of mine, Raket b'ni lo tashev shama. You are not to bring my son back there. Vayasem ha'eved et yado, the servant put his hand, tachat yerech Avraham Adonav, under the thigh of Abraham's Lord, vayishavalo ala davar hazeh, and swore to him an oath on this matter. Okay, just want to let that sit in. I'm going to tell you right at the beginning, the one thing I will not discuss, and I will not answer any questions on, is the hand under the thigh business. Don't even bother asking me, okay? All I'll say is this is like an oath, and this is a handshake, and this is that sign, and leave it on the side. It's a footnote to this whole discussion. But I find the whole that scene. It's I read this with I'm in there, and I'm almost reading it as I'm inside the scene. And like I'm on the stage. I'm a prop on the stage. I would love to convey that kind of modality of reading, which is you're the plant in the side. You are somewhere near that. You're a tree. You're this. And you're witnessing this inside. And then at the same time, just one second on that. A strategy of reading is also to say, I'm the director of this play, and it's my job in this play, based on my interpretation, the director's privilege, prerogative, to instruct the actors to interpret it, to take it in one direction as opposed to another direction. Because I have an idea of the characters here, and there are two characters here essentially. There's Abram and his servant. And that's already wonderful, okay? And there's a third character here hovering over this, which is God, and God is invisible. God speaks, but God isn't speaking here. We have God in the background as having blessed Abraham, whatever that means. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay. And so again, the strategy for reading is you're a plant on the stage, but you're also the reader, you're the audience, but you're also the director. And as the director, you have the prerogative to instruct your actors to take it in a certain direction. I have a direction that I want to take the actors in here, okay? And I think it's plausible and compelling, but may not be compelling enough to you. But that's our conversation and our argument, okay? So before we get any further, let us talk. Let me get Nanette and your question. Go ahead, unmute.
Okay. It's really not a question. It's a statement, really. Based upon what you just said, maybe I'm the director, maybe I'm on stage, whatever. To me, it's like Susie said, it's very poetic.
Of
So to
course,
me, it's on one hand, Abraham is giving instruction to the servant. On the other hand, I mean, he's able to be very emotional about this. I mean, this is his son.
yes.
You got to get the right wife.
Well, there's not only that, but both of you are and I'm sure we're all picked that up. There are some poetic qualities to the text itself, namely, it's the way that it starts out and the way that it ends. It functions as a kind of inclusio, which means it's a very similar phrase at the beginning. It means don't take. Basically, he says, "Don't take my son back there," and then he ends, "Don't take my son back there," basically. And
And there's
what's that?
there's rhyming.
And
That's
there's
all.
rhyming, and there's I mean, I dressed it up a lot, and way to go me. I mean, this is, I would say that's, I mean, there is probably underneath all of this a song. There's probably melody. There's probably, I mean, these texts were not, we chant them in the shul for a reason, but they also have a music that may be lost to us as well. Nevertheless, so here is this text again. I'll just go zip through it again. So it's Abraham. God blesses Abraham with everything. He says to his servant, "Put your hand. I swear to God, don't take a wife for my son from the women of Canaanites." I just want to say, I have to say this every time we study this, the Canaanite women, feh, right? We hate them. You know, it's bad, okay? But you know, there's such an animus. I mean, I don't want to feel ashamed of this, but the Bible has such a terrible animus towards these Canaanite women, and for a reason, which is they identify with Canaanites everything moral, immoral, and depraved. Okay, whether it's true or not is irrelevant. They see the Canaanites as being sexually licentious and immoral and completely, you know, subordinate to all sorts of, corrupt power. And so, anytime you get close to the Canaanites, it's almost like a taboo. However, by the fourth generation, they're marrying Canaanites left and right. Rather, you are to go to my land, right? Go back to Eretz Moladiti, Artzi Moladiti. These terms echo in our ears. Take a wife for my son. So you go back there. The servant said to him, maybe she's not going to come. Maybe she doesn't want to come, which is a perfectly legitimate, objection to this. Should I bring him back there? And he said, no, don't ever bring him back there. And this is there's real tension here, right? God, and this is my verse, God who took me out of my father's house, he himself will send to you. All right. So the idea, I'm just going to stop here, Sharon. The idea that first of all, you can see the animus to the Canaanites, and you can see also a not so hidden, a very disclosed animus that he has to his land of origin, not because um, he is opposed to it on moral, religious, or theological. After all, he wants to get a woman there from him. He just doesn't want Isaac to go there. And the reason why he doesn't want Isaac to go there is because God has promised the land to his descendants, to Isaac. So he wants Isaac to stay there. And what's the obvious reason why Abraham doesn't want Isaac to go back to that land? What's the obvious reason?
Maybe he
Coming
doesn't
away from his
trust his judgment.
He doesn't trust him. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful in terms of, the reality of the strong father who has basically, he doesn't have a lot of confidence in his son here. That is, his son, you're not going to live up to me. And so by not living up to me, I'm not going to, put you in this position where you'll be tested to your loyalty to me and to God and to your wife. Okay. And not only that, one second, Steve, I see you saying, but I have in my ear Genesis 2, which is Al Kain Yazov Ish et Aviv v'nimo v'davak l'ishto. A man leaves his own parents and cleaves to his wife.
Leaves his wife.
So here, that's exactly what is going to happen, right? If he sends him back to her house to find a woman over there, he's going to stay there, and he doesn't want that to happen. Steve Parkoff, go ahead.
How about Laban. He's
Yep.
afraid that he'll be sucked in by Laban the way he was, and will stay there.
Well, so what you here's that does happen. Okay, we're way before that. We're Betuel here. Laban is the brother of Rebecca. But see what happens. Yaakov goes back to find a wife there and ends up staying there. And in fact, this is precisely the tension. You go there, you're going to be immersed in that world, in that family. It's a big family. I mean, I get it. What do I get about it is it's so interesting because this dynamic plays itself out, I think, in every single family in existence. One second, Marlene. It plays itself out. Why? I have children, they're married, right? Okay. So we all, thank God, all the in-laws get along, everybody gets along with each other, right? And the kids are all very, very attentive to how to navigate time and whatever, and there's no one that's usurping the other, okay? But not every family is like that. Some families are very dominant by the matriarchal, the wife's family, and some families are dominated by the husband's family, so that when you marry into the family, you're marrying into the family, and your family of origin is subordinate to the family that you marry into. And what does Abraham have? We've talked about this in the past, but it's worth reminding ourselves. There's nothing here. There are no siblings. I mean, there's Ishmael. He's off. He's on a different, district. Isaac's got no brothers. We've got two elderly parents. One who, is living in Hebron, and one who's living in Beersheba. Figure that one out. They're not together. He's got a land. Okay. It's a desert. Okay. So, she's got, I mean, and we know something about the family there. It's a huge family. It's a clan. It's an amazing for their big family there. I mean, look at, Pesach and anachronistically. Where are you going to make your Seder? You're going to make your Seder when you have one person, your own husband, or are you going to make your Seder where there's lots and lots of people, brothers and sisters and cousins and everything, and everybody's having fun, etc. I mean, there, Abraham can't hold a candle to Nahor, not a wick, okay? And so he understands here in saying to the servant, don't go there, don't take him there, that he'll be completely absorbed by it. Not only because he lacks confidence in him, which I agree, okay, but because he can't even compete with that. John, go ahead.
All the things you just said lead me to question the statement in the beginning that Abraham is blessed in all things.
Thank
He's
you
not
very
blessed.
much. Okay, so you anticipated my little critical question here, which is, is that a true statement when God says, when the text says God blessed Abraham with everything or in everything, and my oppositional defiance disorder kicks in and goes like, really? Did God bless him here? What does he have to show her? Is the text protesting too much? Okay, let's go into. I'm looking at the clock and I see that we gotta zoom through. Okay,
Uh,
so
Rabbi,
no,
is there
yes,
only one family that the servant could go and find a wife from, or is it going to be like Esther, and there's going to be a whole parade of women? Because it seems to say, and what if she doesn't? Is
I
it
I
after a long choice system? Nahor isn't the only one who lives back there who was part of the clan.
right. So I agree with that reading 100%. And the text sets us up for this. You know, part of the trick when we read the Bibles, we know the story already. Okay, so we know how this ends up. So we don't stop to think in real time the possibility that he's not going to find, the exact cousin. He's going to find someone else, right? And or the first person that comes is going to fail in his test, in his challenge, right? We don't and the text doesn't we do not have the luxury to go through the door number one, door number two, door number three process in this story. The story is long enough, so the story has to economize in its plot detail,
Yeah,
and
the foreshadowing of the prayer, and it's going to be
absolutely,
answered.
and the story is also built on this tension and the beauty of the miracle, which is and it is the Tevye Fiddler on the Roof miracle, wonder of miracles that they find each other. He finds the woman on the first shot. You know that that life's not like that often, although life is like that very often for people. You know, how many romantic stories are? I took one look at her, and that was the one, right? So the story is playing on certain realities that we certainly can recognize. Okay, and that's a great question. Now let's go to the reading of the text. So when it says in this verse, Avram Zaken Baba Yamim Adonai Barakah Avram Bakol, John's question is my question is really, did he bless him with everything? But just take a look here, and I left out the English translations here, but the second verse, which is Vayomer Avraham el Avdos kan beito Moshe b'chol asher lo simna yachat rechi. Abraham says to his Eved, his servant, Zikan beito, the elder of his household, Hamoshel b'chol asher lo, the guy who runs everything, simna yachat rechi. And so what we have in a close reading here of between just verse 1 and verse 2. Think about it. I mean, just as we put this really under a magnifying glass, we have a very strong parallel between Abraham and his servant in the words that the text uses to describe them both. Abraham is Zaken, the Eved is the Khan. Abraham is blessed Bakol, and the Eved, the servant, is Hamoshel Bechol. So the text, the narrator, the storyteller here is trying to cue to us, to signal to us, these two are similar. That is actually very interesting. I'll stop here for a second because I want to say, that's not an intuitive, sense that we get from a traditional reading of it. Why? Because he's the servant. The servant is a subordinate. However, and here this I'm showing my bias to the reading of the story, this servant holds his own. This servant has learned from the best that there is. And this servant is not only a servant, but the servant is a companion. This is Don Quixote and, Sancho.
Pancho Panza.
Sancho Panza, right? So, in the way that we picture this is like the romantic fool and his sidekick who is much more attuned, and that kind of buddy system here, I think is at play here because what those two verses do for us in the space of I don't know a dozen words, maybe 20 words is it says these two characters are formidable characters, and there's a tension between the two of them not in any kind of rivalry at all, but in the sense of, the one who wants to please the other and the one who really has nobody else but the other. Look, Abraham, there's no wife here. Sarah's gone. Okay. I'm sorry for all the romantic people who interpret the story romantically. She's not in the picture. Okay. She's not, she died, first of all. She's definitely not in the picture. Okay. So it's ridiculous to even say to even posit this. He is, for all intents and purposes, even if the relationship was good, she's dead. He's a widower. Okay, so he's alone in that sense. He really has no buddies, and Yitzchak is the son that he's not confident of, and the relationship has been ruptured. So who does he have? All he has is the servant, and the servant is Hamoshel B'chol Asher Lo. He is the guy that runs everything. The servant is the chief of staff. The servant is his executive officer. The servant is the person with whom he has the most important relationship. Okay? The servant is the one who knows all his secrets, all his confidences. Giving him a little texture here. If I'm directing the story here, if I'm the director of the play, I that's I sit the character down and say, I sit the actor down and say, you're playing a person who's not just Sancho, who's not just little like Robin to Batman, okay? You're playing someone, the boy wonder. You're playing someone who's equally, who is just as old, maybe, a few years younger. Abraham is up there, but he is capable, he's smart, and he's not the leader, he's not the charismatic person, but he's the quiet person who runs things. Since the Dick Cheney passed away last week, you could make all sorts of comments about it, but the thing that everybody says about him is that he was the most powerful vice president in history of the United States. Why? Well, they perceive George W. Bush in a certain way, but they also say, look, this was quiet. This was a person and he was probably at some point very close confidant with him, maybe not at other points, whatever, leave that aside. The point is that there is a model of a relationship where the chief person, the leader, the king, the prophet, the whatever, has the trusted advisor. And that's what the servant is to him. John, you have a question? Go ahead.
I think it's interesting that the description, he was the master of everything in the house. That was what Joseph was in the house of Potiphar.
Perfect. Okay, you're getting the A today, John, because the you know the I'm going to skip over this. Did God bless Abraham with everything? Okay, there are points for and points against, but look at the way that the charge is in, and all of you notice the poetry of this. So, Vayomer Abraham el Avdo Zkan Beito Hamoshe B'chol Asher Lo. Avdo, Sukan Beito, I highlighted this in yellow, green, and blue, only to indicate that it's one word, two words, four words, okay? And that what that does is it tells us it makes us hear certain music, which is we are enhancing the position of this person. Similar, I said, look at similarities. That's from Lech Lecha, the beginning. Bincha Yechidcha Asher Ahavta Yitzchak, that's the Akedah. And, John, with Joseph. Vayisharet Oto, when this is Potiphar, sees, finds favor in the eyes of Joseph, finds favor in the eyes of his master, Potiphar. Vayisharet Oto, he serves him. Vayafkidehu al Beito, he puts him in charge of his household. V'chol yeshlo natan biyado, and everything he had, he gave to him. Okay, it's exactly the same, right? And so what you have there, and it's exactly the same, but in fact, it's the inverse. Okay, because when the servant of Abraham is the pal, companion, confidant of Abraham, Joseph is the rival of Potiphar. Joseph ends up being, um, the one that is framed by his wife, Potiphar's wife, and while Potiphar favors Joseph, um, uh, that what ends up happening is a violation of that relationship, you know, because that's what Joseph is framed with. But we're correct to sense it. Okay. My main question then is back to the point. So what happens in the story here, okay, is the Abraham gives the charge to his servant, and don't bring her back here. And then he says the following, and we'll read this again. Adonai, Elohei Hashemayim, asher לקחני מבית אבי, ומארץ מולדתי, ואשר דיבר לי, ואשר נשבע לי, לאמור, לזרעך אתן הארץ, הוא ישלח מלאכו לפניך. I'll stop there. God, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my kindred, who spoke to me, who swore to me, saying, I give this land to your seed. He himself will send you this messenger on before you, so that you take a wife from my son there. Now, I'm the director of this play, and I'm the teacher of this class, and I'm interpreting this, this moment where Abraham turns to his trusted confidant servant and says, God will see himself. He will send himself, his messenger before you. And I want to ask, what's the motivation there? What's the music there? What are you trying to say? Okay? And I'm going to base myself not only on my intuitive reaction to it, but also to some classic commentators. Only one or two that really, state this. Here we have Ibn Ezra, who makes this and says, who Yishlach Malacho, God, He will send His angel, Tefillah. This is Abraham's prayer. For if this was a prophecy of Abraham, in the sense of this is, God, this is what's going to happen. Lama amar, why is it saying if she doesn't come back? In other words, when Abraham says this to his servant, he's saying it in the way of a prayer, okay? Or Bechor Shor, who says as follows: Yesh lamar shezet tefillah. There are those who say that this is a prayer. Yesh lamar shezo haftacha, and there are those who say that this is the promise, the oath. Shakadosh Baruch Hu, that God Yishlach Malacho Yatzilchena. That what Abraham is doing here is basically, it's not a prayer. A prayer is saying, may God send his messenger to you, right? That's how he's saying it. And here, the contrary view is God will send his messenger to you. Now, those are two basic ways of reading this. I have a third, okay, which, of course, the commentaries never get my opinion. They never express my opinion on this. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying they just didn't think the way I think. Okay. So on the one hand, he's saying it with a prayer, right? So I'm the director and I'm saying, okay, try this out, Abraham. You're saying this as, nicely to you're nice, Abraham. You're good, Abraham. You're kind, Abraham. And you're saying, may God send his messenger to you and make your thing fulfilled. Okay. And then there's earnest Abraham. There's earnest Abraham, Abraham of total trust, Abraham of total, connection to God. God who took me out, he will send. He will send. I am sure of that. God will send. And then there's a third Abraham, at least in my imagination, which is, well, stop with the first two. Do we have praying Abraham or trusting Abraham? Which is your Abraham here? Anybody want to chime in?
Well, linguistically, I would say it's not a prayer. It's the havtacha.
You're
Just
saying, okay,
just based on the way the text is written.
nice. Okay, so that's a good, Susie, good classic commentator. Okay, so you're following, and there's a whole cluster of traditional commentators who are really into saying that this is a statement of, look, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Okay, Bob Like.
My third would be he's both.
Okay.
There's a bit of chesed and there's a bit of gevura in all of
Okay.
that that's going on
Very
and they're
nice.
playing
Very
together.
nice. I love that. Okay. Very conciliatory. So, well, you've been, this is, I take notice in the fact that, we have a lot of texture in that interpretation. Okay. Good. Yeah. There's plaintiveness and there's assuredness. Any other comments on this? Any other valence here? All right, so I'm gonna give mine, which is I think there's a defiance here, and I read it. I'm gonna put it up on the text on the thing here again, and make the claim that he said what he's saying here. Okay, sorry here. This is his don't. I'm reading it with this tone of voice, and this is how I would say as a director, I would say, push it as hard as you can, Abraham, the actor. Okay, go for it. Be angry and stern with your servant. Hishamer lecha, pentashiva ben Hishama. Take you care that you do not bring her back there, bring my son back there. I don't want, and you have to hear in that voice the absolute defiance. You're not going back there. I put my foot down. Okay. Adonai Eloi Hashemayim asher lekachani מבית אבי ומארץ מולדתי. God, who took me from my father's house, who took me from my land, my birthplace, from my kindred, who spoke to me, who swore to me, saying, I gave this land to you, he himself will send his messenger on before you so that you will take away from my son there. Okay? Now he's saying this as a rebuke to God. This is my direction here. Abraham in my direction has to feel a sense that Abraham has felt before, which is that part of his life and what he's experienced in his life, he completely agrees, he goes along out of his loyalty, out of his fervent loyalty. But you know what? He's been tested one too many times. And he is basically saying, God who took me out, God who brought me here. And what he's saying underneath the lines is God who tested me, who separated me from my ancestry, who brought me on this journey, who subjected me to all sorts of trials and tribulations, who brought me up to Mount Moriah, in which he gave me the ultimate test, which I had to quell my own feelings of relationship and love to my son. And I did that. He owes me. He owes me. And because he owes me, he is not going to let you down. He is not going to let me down. He owes me big time. And if he does let you down, I'm telling him it's over. Okay? This is an ultimatum to God. And nobody like Abraham can stand up to God. And I think nobody has the moral legitimacy to make that defiance to God. Now we can interpret it with in the traditional frame and give him a portraiture of piety and righteousness and compassion and all of that. And there's where to go with that, okay? And we could give him the portrait of, you know, earnestness, right? And I have in my mind, two paradigms. I mentioned them in the chapter of Noah because I think that we think of Noah as the Torah describes Noah as a righteous man, but not as a good man. And I came to this conclusion that a good person, you admire. A righteous person, you kind of revere. There are two different, relationships here. And I want to ask what kind of person is Abraham? Is Abraham, nice guy Abraham? Admire him. Or is Abraham, person who is to be revered? Or is Abraham a person who has a certain kind of claim here? And what I'm arguing for is uh, he, at certain times in life, of course, he's the hospitable, genuine, generous person. And at certain times, he's a defiant person. And here he is cashing in on his commitment. And that's the Abraham. So we got Susie and Marlene. Go ahead.
So,
Susie first.
Yeah.
I mean, we have this. This comes down to us. It's all the time in our tefillot. We talk to God bilshon tzivui.
Yeah, isn't that interesting that we have the chutzpah to command God to do stuff? And so here, I would say it's one thing to say, and I said it earlier, we don't have to be people who think that we are Abraham, that we have to sacrifice our first, our sons and onlys. That's not make the demand on us. And yet, we, we live like we are. We have the chutzpah to tell God, this is what you need to do. I mean, that's unique in Jewish prayer. You're right. Go ahead, Marlene.
And he also already has a relationship with God. They can talk to each other. He already said for the 40 and the 35 and the 20. So he and God are on some kind of a level where he's got a step up, that Abraham has a step up.
So they're absolutely. I think that's very, it's close reading here. The close reading is that the relationship is intact. The relationship, we can argue, at what point do they talk to each other? Do they not talk to each other? At what point is the relationship severed? I've made that argument on many other cases. Um, but I think there is a very strong argument to be made here, which is I have enough confidence in my relationship with God to be able to say confidently that God is going to do this. Okay, and it's not as if he's saying or else, but there really is an or else here. The or else is you got no project. It's over, right? The covenant is over. So in a way, he's saying, look, I I trust God to maintain his side of the bargain. And I mean, I just said that nicely and calmly, but I think he said it to the servant, not as a nice guy, but as a guy who's saying it. Well, from what I've been through, from all the things that I've been through in the last, I don't know, 50 years, 70 years. Yeah, he owes me. Go ahead, John.
Well, if you were directing this play and you had this approach, it would be interesting to bring God into the story,
Okay.
see how God reacted to the defiance.
So we all love God, and we can't alienate God here, okay? And I have a certain, I follow an idea in the that's the rabbinic. I'm gonna play my rabbi card, okay? The rabbi card is that God loves a good argument. The rabbis say this all in different places, right? God, the rabbis debate things. The rabbis, prove one thing. There's lots, nice stories about this. And then they ask, what was God doing when, this debate? And God says, I really enjoyed this. I'm paraphrasing, but, when uh, I'm of two minds. We read last week the scene of Abraham arguing with God, so you can understand that scene as very frustrating to God. That Abraham is very annoyed by. I'm sorry, God is very annoyed by Abraham. Or you could say, God really enjoyed this, and that no other character has this. Moses will have some of that too, and God, God is pained by it, but also that's a relationship. Look, there are people, the couples especially, who have relationships in which they bicker with each other, right? They enjoy arguing. They enjoy. I mean, it's, up to a point, obviously, they don't want to kill each other, but there are certain marriages that obviously enjoy that kind of energy too, where they're constantly bickering, like the couple that says, the husband says, someone asks them, "What's the secret of your marriage?" And the husband says, "We bicker," and the wife says, "No, we don't." Right? So that's the point. The point is that there's a joy in the fact that they have this relationship, and it's built by that. Um, I see Bonnie or Sheldon. Go ahead.
So the the viewpoint is that after the Akedah, Isaac was estranged from his father.
Yes.
Why did Avram think that Isaac would accept the wife that his father is giving him?
I think that's a great question, and it goes to really how we portray Isaac, what would be the character portrait of him? Is he a person who is compliant, or is he a person that's defiant? And I think the case can be made here that he's not defiant, that he will comply with everything. That Isaac, in my reading here, and I have no reason to make a case that other than there's a softer character here. That this is a character who doesn't argue with God, who doesn't have, strong feelings one another. The only thing that he has strong as a feeling is that he loves his wife, loves his wife very much. Yeah. So and he's alone, and he doesn't want to find a wife, and he'll take anyone that he brings her. But he loves her. Go ahead, Susie. Go ahead.
So it's quite possible that, we don't know what's going to happen. Whether he's going to accept whoever, there's a there's the other, the sliding doors possibility. It could be that it went the other way. But, he goes out into the field and Rivka comes along and, he just looks at her and just, I mean, I have a neighbor who was set up with her husband by somebody on a blind date, and so he's coming to pick her up for their first date, and she opens the door, and she said to me once, she said, "I just looked at him and I just knew." So it could be that it happened there too.
I agree. I agree. There's so many layers on this story, and there. Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Keep going with what you're going to
I
say.
was going to say there's so many layers to peel off this story, which is, Isaac is very much unlike his father, but who is very much like his father? Rebecca.
Yeah.
Rebecca is the um, uh, analog to Abraham in so many ways. Just migration is one, and you know what else? Um, she is the one that when asked, and we've studied this in such a perfect moment, when they turn to her and ask her later in the chapter, "Do you want to go?" And she says, "Elech, I'm going to go." And we see from that you know I would direct Rebecca in that thing to say not as defiance, although I want to give the audience just a little tease. Maybe there is a little bit, but go because you're resolute, and match your future father-in-law in the degree to which we have to take you seriously. And she is certainly of the matriarchs the most formidable of the matriarchs, who can stand her own with Abraham.
She's
Bob,
adventurous.
yes, Bob, Stanley, John, go ahead.
Your last comment very much resonates with me and connects up to, we've been talking mostly on the human physical dimension, but not really spiritually. What does this all mean? And what I mean by that is, rather than being necessarily estranged from his son, which I'm not sure he completely was, he actually is looking for where chesed can enter into his life, whether it's through Rebecca or himself being carried on. And even though Sarah may be gone from the physical world, I think her presence is still there. And so part of the question here is he's not just searching for a wife, but he's searching for a fix, if you will, of the strictness, the judgment, and all the gevura, which is part of his life. In fact, one of the most unusual things I heard recently from a Hasidic perspective was that the Akedah was also a binding of gevura, that you not have excessive judgment and strictness, but that kindness also needs to be part of it. So I'm just wondering, to what degree does that resonate? I know that's starting to sound into the realms you like
Well,
to drink
again,
wine with, but
I appreciate you bringing that world into this story, and I give you honor and credit for creating a sermon here out of the symbolism of this, and it's plausible and compelling in that world, and in a world in which the dynamics are exactly as you spoke between Chesed and Gvura and all these things that are playing itself, and you're seeing the text not as necessarily the the play that's on the stage where the characters are truly encountering each other and building and breaking relationships, but seeing it as a kind of allegory for a deeper a deeper conflict between all the things that are in herself. And I appreciate that. Uh, and I may be confessing here that I'm not as deep as that, or I'm certainly confessing that I'm not as mystical as that. What I am is, I'm a bit of a ham, and I'm a bit of an actor myself, and I'm a bit of a storyteller, and I want to feel what they're feeling. I want the emotion. Okay, I want to feel the emotion of it, and I want to feel the frustration of it, and I want to feel the intense desire of it. I want to feel the satisfaction of it. I want to feel the humor of it, and I want to feel the totality of what is available to me in on the stage. And I want to then grab the actor or the character and say, "What were you thinking when you said this? What did you say? Why, what did it mean when you said God will provide, God will see? Are you saying, I mean, that I would interview Abraham and say, were you saying here this as a prayer, or were you saying this as a statement of faith, or are you saying it the way I think you're saying it, which is God owes me this?" And
so if
I'm
you were a director of it, would
yes,
you put on a T-shirt where on one of them it would be this concept allegory and then you enter the play with
no,
the same thing? You get rid of those labels.
I
You
wouldn't.
don't wear
I'm not,
signs. You don't.
I'm just Elliot Baramet, and I'm just seeing characters play it out, and I'm just seeing. I want to see myself there, and I'm not in that realm of that conflict. I'm in the realm of what is, he's this is his problem. He's got a God. He's got a God who wants everything from him and never delivers for him. Okay? How would you be with that? That's what I want to see. All right, Stanley, John, go ahead.
So I have to ask you a question first before I make a comment, and that is, am I right that Avraham is saying that he wants Eliezer to bring Yitzchak back to where he Avraham is, and that where he is constitutes at least part of what is now the land of Israel?
He wants Eliezer to bring the wife
I
back
mean,
to
the
the
wife
land.
back.
The
Yes.
land. That's what he wants. That's the charge. The charge is go get a woman, bring her back to the land because he's not going to leave the land. That's exactly what, yes, the answer is yes.
But the land is the land that was promised by God to
Exactly,
Abraham.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
All right. So what strikes me about this, and I'm fascinated by how you've looked at this, is how much the world and the Arabs in particular don't seem to understand the attachment that Jews have to Israel.
Isn't it
It's like
something?
another
Yes.
country. Jews can go and live in Texas or they can live in Canada. There's a
Yeah,
joke about that stuttering and so on
yeah.
that God said you can have or Moses was asking for kana, and he says, all right. Wanted to say God was going to say Canada, but he said, all right, take Canaan. But in any case, it's not any country that the Jews can go to. There was the prospect of Uganda and so on. But
Exactly.
I don't see that. I don't see that talked about or mentioned
No, it's
by anyone,
be,
that this is
yeah,
such a visceral thing for Jews, that
right.
that's where we are and that's where we belong. And
Well,
that was promised to us 3,000 years ago, and
yeah.
that's not trivial. And Abraham is reinforcing this. He doesn't want the
Well,
wife and Yitzchak to be settling somewhere else. This is our land.
right. And so what you are saying in a nutshell is how removed the world is from the Bible, the biblical story. I think to a certain extent how much the Jews themselves, that is to say, Jews outside of the land of Israel, are removed from the biblical story because when you ask Jews to explain what Zionism is about, they don't get to this part of the story. And they don't, and it's a sermon, but I'll give you the sermon in two sentences. Do you live your life as part of a story, or do you live your life as part of a commandment? And those are two different impulses. In the case of Judaism, it's a commandment to live in the land of Israel, but you know what? It's also a story, and living inside a story is very, very compelling. And Jews are detached from their story, which is why, and for lots of reasons, I think to say we are at home in America, and that's absolutely valid. Um, and that comes at a price. To say I'm at home in America comes at a price to say I'm not part of that story. And Zionism has had to contend with the conflict and the tension between living in the American story and living in the Zionist Israel story. And what you're saying here is that, okay, if you were just to place this in front of an audience and say, well, this is the justification for the land of Israel as the homeland of the Jews, so there are two answers to that. One is, it's just a story, right? It's nonsense. Who believes in nonsense? Or, you know, well, this is the Jews, and the Jews, this is their way of justifying, the usurpation of other indigenous peoples. And that, of course,
Yeah,
is the other thing. John, go ahead.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have another play you should direct.
Yes.
Um, Isaac is walking by himself when Rebecca's approaching. So one question, what is in his mind? Why is he out there walking? And
Yes.
what is in Rebecca's mind when she sees him? Because I think
Yes.
she
I love it. I
puts the
love it. So,
veil on.
yeah. So that's where I would go. I would kind of lighten it up a little bit. I'm so dark in the first scenes of this play, but I would lighten it up and say that there's got to be some love here, and there's got to be humor here, and the tension that I've built into this has to have its resolution. And I love those characters a lot. And I love that they get together. And I love that they're both they're without their parents. It's tragic in the sense that he doesn't have his mother. He really doesn't have his father. She doesn't have her mother, and she doesn't have her father. And the two of these people have to make their life together. And so there's a tragic dimension to that. But the moment, let's rejoice with them in the moment that they come together. Let's say l'chaim, and they do become a kind of paradigm for Judaism altogether. You know, there is a certain sense in the romantic. I mean, any wedding that is performed during this week, throughout this week, I guarantee any rabbi officiating at any wedding that is being performed between now and Sunday is going to say, like Rebecca and Yitzchak, the two. It's just there for the taking. It's absolutely great. Okay, let's leave it there. Thank you all. We'll see you next week. Have a wonderful week. A lot of
Take
comfort
care.
to
You.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
And we'll
Okay.
see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.